Well, Phil, Siemens Energy has done another investigation into the Siemens Gamesa acquisition, and they're really trying to hone down on what the actual cost is going to be in the charges, right? So, a few weeks ago, Siemens Energy announced a $2.2 billion in charges, or 2.2 billion euros in charges, including 1.6 billion to address onshore wind problems. Well, that looks like the 1.6 is actually closer to 4.5 billion euros. So there is a lot of concerning reports coming out of Siemens Energy at the moment. The stock has dropped when that announcement came out. I think it's going to recover, obviously. But there's just so many variables here. And if you're hearing the same reports that I'm hearing, Phil, it sounds like they got an internal audit or an internal committee reviewing the financial status of Siemens Gamesa and trying to figure out what is going on and to put a number on what the expenses are going to be to fix a lot of these Siemens Gamesa issues. Are you hearing the same thing?
Yes. So the obviously the bad news is the financial impact seems to keep getting worse. The good news, I guess, is that they have indicated publicly now that they have a fix. They've identified what the problems are on the manufacturing side of things, and they have a fix for any of the serial defect issues that they have. The problem with that is that I don't think they fully accounted for any liquidated damages or other associated charges for repairs or replacements that may need to be made as a result of having to fix blades in the field that may have been impacted by this serial defect issue with the manufacturing. So the question is, are we at the end of this, increasing number? Is 4.5 billion euros the end? Or how much further do we have to go? And frankly, how much more is Siemens Energy going to take in terms of a willingness to continue propping up the company? Rumors also abound as to whether or not onshore wind in Siemens Gamesa and Siemens Energy is going to stick around, or if they're going to just divest it. The question there is who's buying with all that kind of an asset liability on the books. You've got a situation where in the past, when companies have been on the brink of disaster, somebody comes in and just asset strips. It's usually not somebody that comes and buys out the entire organization. They'll just buy the healthy assets that they want to have access to, which opens up the door to some interesting questions, because you've had recent reports about Chinese OEMs looking at Eastern Europe with a lot more vim and vigor. You've even got some Indian, OEMs that are now making inroads in India, ramping up, and they have ambitions globally. Companies like Suzlon, that's now out of debt, and companies like Adani Group, that has set up both a solar subsidiary and a wind subsidiary. They're also interested in expanding a global footprint. So, does it make sense for any of those companies to step in and, dive in on an acquisition in part or in whole?
Well, does it make sense for a Suzlon to move that way, just to acquire those assets, those useful assets, or maybe it's a play on the aftermarket things, on sustaining onshore wind turbines for Siemens Gamesa? That may be where a lot of good asset lies on full service agreements and those kind of things.
And if you recall back to the Senvion implosion about 5 or 6 years ago, that's actually what happened with Siemens Gamesa. They came in and they gobbled up all the long-term service contracts for all the Senvion turbines throughout Europe and North and South America, Asia, Australia, etc. And the reason for that was twofold. A, they wanted the service contracts and the service revenue, and also helped them expand the multi-brand service capability. But the other thing it did is it gave them the first option to be able to repower those projects with Senvion turbines, utilizing Siemens Gamesa turbines, since they had that commercial relationship now with the asset owner. So this is interesting. I don't actually know what's going to happen as yet. I mean, there's a lot of discussions that are ongoing at this point. It's too soon to predict what the real outcome of this is going to be.
And I've heard on the engineering side, particularly in regards to blades, that the preference going forward is to make the one-piece blades, Rosemary, not the two clamshells glued together. Maybe that's where some of the problems lie, at least is what it sounds like from what I'm hearing for the field.
Yeah, well, it's a nice, elegant design, and in theory, the component that you end up with should be more reliable because you cut out a lot of the glue joints, which are, very problematic for most manufacturers, to get, consistent gluing. Be sure that you've got consistent bond in all of the components that are glued together. So it's definitely a good goal, but change over that one risk for another one, which is that your manufacturing process becomes a lot harder to control, and or it just becomes more complicated anyway. Designing the component so that it can be manufactured becomes more complicated, and I guess that's the trade-off. That's why we don't see exclusively one-piece blades, because I assume that Siemens had a patent on it, but I'd be surprised if they still did, because they've been making blades like that for a long time. So I mean, if it was just clear that one way was just definitely better than the other, then you'd see everyone doing the same thing by now.